Here is a document that is given to my Patreon members. I gave it to the free tier because I wanted to set the record straight. I will read it, but in the actual presentation, you will see a slide deck of my lecture on these, what I call categorizations. So, in 78 chapters, Boma enters a journey through the entire cosmos, or to put it differently, through his interior universe. For reasons we cannot fully grasp, this uneducated man did not restrain himself in presenting a profoundly syncretistic doctrine. He spread his wings in many directions. Because we have had centuries to study his writings, we are finally able to gesture toward the structure of his system. Without the lions of the field, we would never have recognized such an intensely ordered worldview from the most formidable figures in esoteric history. Scholars such as Arthur Verse Lewis, Andrew Weeks, Nicholas Goodrick Clark, Glenn McGee, and Alexandra Corre describe Boma's work as unfolding along four major planes. If this is correct, then it follows that the Mysterium Magnum, one of his largest expositions, would also follow this pattern. This assumption forms the starting point for the book's descent into Boma through the lens of the Mysterium alone. The central truth is simple. Mastery of Boma does not require anything beyond his own perspective. By organizing the Mysterium along these four classifications, the entire work can be analyzed. Once each analysis is tied back together through this framework, a 78-point presentation emerges, 1 point for each chapter. For example, Chapter 1 concerns the Ungrund and the eternal will. It contains several major themes such as the Ungrund, eternal motion, the opening of the first principle, the soul's root in freedom, and the threshold of creation. These themes resurface in other chapters. The first chapter is not an isolated statement. It is an illuminated and expanded throughout the book. This immense network of connections appear accidental, yet according to scholars, it reflects the proper way to read both Boma and the Mysterium. You cannot understand the entire neighborhood by looking through a single window of a single house. It may sound like rambling, and in some sense it is. This is why so many readers fail to conquer the text. The Ungrund disrupts any attempt to reduce the whole to one of its parts. The experience cannot be framed by examining a local chapter in isolation. The interconnection is remarkable, and this is what makes the Mysterium so difficult to comprehend. It is, in a sense, looking into the depth of the mind and seeing that it does not care for reason, categories, or classification. This current runs through the entire book, and when you step outside its atmosphere, you find either that you never want to return or that you carry a subtle residue, a trace that you have been there, even if you cannot explain how that scent settled into your thinking. This is the common experience. I wrote this, by the way. The entire purpose is to avoid the impulse to clarify Boma by forcing him into simpler systems. Any framework that is less intricate than his own will collapse under the weight of what he is doing. These reductions do not illuminate the Mysterium, they only flatten it. The complexity of the Mysterium cannot be explained by comparison to cleaner metaphysical schemes. And because those schemes operate at a lower level of richness, Boma cannot be reduced without losing exactly what makes him Boma. You will inevitably encounter the limitations of your own mind. This is unavoidable. What complicates matters even further is that you cannot take the mental strain produced by reading Boma and treat that strain as if it were Boma himself. No mind is capable of fully tracking what he accomplishes. The suggestive elements that give the Mysterium its character do not appear in other works. It is a singular experience. Even if a reader could retain everything, they would not be able to explain it in a complete way. And the material resists ordinary mapping and eludes simple articulation. In a very real sense, this is evidence that the book still carries the power it always possessed. It refuses to be captured or enclosed. If we try to describe what is happening, it resembles a revelatory experience similar to Ezekiel's vision of the wheels he associated with God. One wheel turns and the others turn with it. You witness motion from a fixed point of perception, and that motion produces structural change throughout the whole. There is no way to contain this within a local definition. It resists such framing, because no system can serve as an adequate substitute for the thing it attempts to systematize. This is the core reason to study the Mysterium, precisely because it cannot be mastered. It becomes an encounter with God or with the Ongrund itself. Ultimately, this gives us rules for the text. And this is the 10-point framework that I provided for an understanding of Boehme's Mysterium Magnum. The first is you got to begin with Boehme's own framework. The starting point is Boehme's internal architecture rather than external systems. His work is already structured across 4 major planes noted by scholars. Using these planes as the interpretive framework honors the text's complexity without imposing foreign categories. So the principle is to interpret Boehme through Boehme, not through systems that simplify him. You must treat the work as interconnected and not linear. Chapters in the Mysterium are not isolated units. Themes recur, cross-reference, and elaborate one another. A local reading is never sufficient on its own. And the principle to be derived here is that a chapter is intelligible only in relation to the entire network of themes that span the book. You'll also need to avoid reductive explanations. Attempts to fit Boehme into cleaner metaphysical schemes flatten the material. His complexity is not accidental, and no simpler system can account for what the text does. If an interpretation, here's the principle. If an interpretation reduces the Mysterium to something more orderly, it is not adequate. You got to acknowledge the limits of the reader's mind, including my own. The difficulty of the text reveals the limits of one's own thinking. This is the part the interpretive experience will put you through. The mental strain is not the doctrine itself, and it must not be mistaken for it. Readerly confusion is a natural effect, but not in an interpretive key. Recognize the singular character of the text. The suggestive and symbolic nature of the Mysterium does not appear in other writings. It is not reproducible by analogy. This uniqueness must be respected. The text needs to be treated as sui generis, not as a typical mystical work. Interpret motion rather than static concepts. The Mysterium describes processes. Themes move, unfold, and transform. Using static definitions misses the dynamic nature of the material. The principle is interpretational focus falls on movement, relation, and transformation, not fixed labels. The next is you have to accept the text's resistance to containment. The Mysterium cannot be fully enclosed by any interpretive method, including my own. This resistance is not an obstacle, but part of what the text expresses. A complete systemization of Boehme is not possible. Exegesis must remain open-ended. You have to also maintain humility about interpretive claims. Because no mind can track the entire structure in totality, interpretations must be modest, provisional, and aware of their limits. Commentary should illuminate without pretending to master the whole. The next is to view exegesis as participation, not domination. The reader is drawn into the text's structural motion. This is less like dissecting a system and more like entering a conversation with something beyond the reader's own conceptual reach. The principle is that interpretation is receptive engagement, not control. The last is you got to let the ungrund remain the ungrund. The text gestures toward what cannot be captured. Respecting this is essential. Do not translate the ineffable into tidy metaphysical claims. My personal view is that the Boma confronts the rational mind with something closer to a dream world. The Mysterium does not follow the conceptual structures the conscious mind expects. It feels more like drifting into an intermediate space where symbols move, transform, and refuse fixed boundaries. For me, this is why the book feels singular. It does not resemble other forms of theological or philosophical writing, and it has an atmosphere of a threshold state. And the mind has to surrender its usual habits to even begin to follow what is happening. That, in essence, is what the entire series of writings, Mysterium Demystified, is going to be about. Through 78 different narrative presentations, we're going to look at the Mysterium and the scholastic views and see exactly what a possible interpretation of this extremely baffling book will provide us. So please subscribe to Patreon, being reintegrated for a not preview, but an exclusive software environment that presents this entire presentation as a 78 pointed course through all 4 movements of every single chapter. I'm so excited to be able to do this work. I'm so happy to present this to the world at this time, and I hope this brings you to being reintegrated, and this work will continue to provide what you're looking for within it. Bye.